Hello, thanks for having me. In 2017, the New Zealand Parliament passed a law granting the Whanganui River full legal personhood. The legislation protects the entire river, which you see here. These are all photos that I've actually taken. The legislation protects the entire river from the mountains to the sea, its tributaries, and all physical and metaphysical elements as an indivisible and living whole. The legislation includes funds to redress the local Maori people for past wrongs and to support work to establish the legal framework for this new governance form. The law requires two formal appointees, both of which currently represent the local Maori, who will speak in public formally for the inherent rights of the river. This is not an isolated event. A recent article in Science proclaims a rights revolution for nature. In 2014, the New Zealand government gave legal rights to the land that previously comprised Te Urewera National Park. In one management change, the Maori board selected to speak for Te Urewera's interests required that rather than applying for a traditional permit, businesses wanting to operate in the area must negotiate friendship agreements that detail how they will, quote, demonstrate loyal affection to Te Urewera values and her need to continue her complex balancing act among living systems. The government of Victoria, Australia, has created a governing council, including Indigenous representatives, that will speak for the Yarra River's interests in planning and in legal disputes. Here we see the Yarra River. Indigenous activists and other local citizens in Australia are lobbying to similarly designate the Margaret River, the Fitzroy River, and the Great Barrier Reef as entities bearing legal rights, with formal representatives, primarily Aboriginal Australians, acting as guardians for them. The Constitutional Court of Colombia has ordered government entities to recognize the rights of the Rio Atrato, including developing a plan to reverse degradation of the river. Similar to the New Zealand precedent, the court required appointment of one government and one community delegate to represent the rights of the river. The Colombian stretch of the Amazon, which you see here, has also been granted legal personhood in Colombia. Courts in Bangladesh, India, and Ecuador have also recognized rivers' legal rights, with concomitant orders to governments to fulfill those rights by remediating and preventing pollution. In the United States, in March of last year, citizens in Toledo, Ohio, voted to give Lake Erie legal personhood, connoting the lake's right to exist, flourish, and naturally evolve, with a full charter that lays out the rights thus granted to the lake. Similar rights of nature initiatives has been passed in various municipalities in the US. The exact governance arrangements of these new grants of legal personhood are still being worked out. Someone will have to have the right to speak for what a given river or mountain or lake needs or wants. But in every case thus far, local citizens have been given increased power to control local resources vital for their survival by being given a voice to say what the environmental feature might want or need to flourish. So what would it mean to switch from our current conception that we own the river to we are the river? Our current legal systems usually start by asking, what do we need? And then slots in some provisions for the planet when those provisions are not too inconvenient or too expensive. The initiatives that I'm discussing here reach for a system of law where we ask first and foremost, what does the planet need? And therefore, ineluctably, what do we need? That is to say, if we think hard enough about what a river or mountain needs and govern accordingly, perhaps in the long run, we are thinking more deeply about what we actually need. That is to say, by sustaining ecosystems and non-human communities, perhaps we are sustaining human communities as well. Many of these initiatives empower Indigenous groups or other local communities with long histories as stewards with traditional ecological knowledge. But the initiatives here that grant cultural and thus management primacy to Indigenous and/or local communities make compelling cases that these communities' worldviews and histories as marginalized people, as stewards of the resource, earn them the authority to speak for and thus manage the rivers and mountains that sustain them. For example, in both of the New Zealand cases, local councils of Maori citizens now are legally empowered to speak for the river and mountains and what these entities need. It is thought they will manage nature as if their lives depend upon it, because their lives do in fact depend upon it. These legal innovations require that we root our laws in the fundamental interdependence between human and non-human communities. When rivers gain legal personhood, this simply means that their interests matter, rather than only our interests in them mattering. Even the most ardent anthropocentrists cannot pursue their own interest if the river or mountain or lake or reef do not have their interests considered, because these entities are the matrices that sustain human life. The schemes here simply put the non-human interests first, or at least on the same footing as our own interests. These initiatives are about relationships between the human and non-human, recognizing first that the relationship actually exists, and then recognizing that we are fundamentally dependent on the continued health and flourishing of the non-human world. Law is just catching up to this inexorable fact. In the slide I have currently, I'm suggesting that this might have special relevance in South Africa in two interrelated and synergistic ways. As all of you will know, Section 27 of your Constitutional Bill of Rights guarantees safe, clean drinking water, which South Africa, more than perhaps any other developing world, has attempted, more than perhaps any other nation in the developing world, has attempted to implement in the law. Your National Water Act promises a reserve that both promotes sustainable ecosystems and would provide the ecological infrastructure that could fulfill the right to safe, clean water. From what I understand, the promise of the National Water Act that connects this reserve to the fundamental human right is fundamentally unfulfilled as of yet. Furthermore, given the historical and present-day social inequities in access to resource and in access to the goods of all public life in South Africa, giving rights to rivers could perhaps mean transferring rights to govern and control resources to those who are currently precluded from controlling the most essential resources for leading healthy, dignified lives. Our ideas about the natural, non-human world themselves become ecological actors, shaping our ethics and therefore our behaviors toward the non-human world. Legal solutions that reflect and reinforce an expanded circle of moral concern tilts the balance towards a stewardship and restoration over use and degradation. For a sustainable, or for any human's future, I believe we need a fundamental shift in how we view the natural world and our relationship with the natural world. South Africa has done quite a bit of forward thinking about the relationship between a human right to water and the ecological infrastructure that supports that right. But the promise of these connections has not yet been fulfilled in South Africa, or anywhere else for that matter. Thinking about granting legal rights to rivers or other ecosystem elements could potentially play a role going forward for how to sustain human and non-human ecosystems in the future in South Africa and everywhere else. If you'd like to know, that just rushed through that quite a bit quickly. If you'd like to know more about both how South Africa has implemented the human right to safe, clean drinking water and about rights for rivers, you can see my social science research network page. I have the link here, or you can write me at that email address. The paper that the talk I just gave will be coming out very soon in the Illinois Law Review in the United States. I'm happy to send you or direct you to an advance copy. I look forward to hearing what the other speakers have to say, and thank you very much for inviting me to share my thoughts on this issue.